Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Our crisis is even worse than it was before.
Skepticism as BC gets a step closer to $10 a day daycare. Also,
there isn't a lot of help right now for, mothers and children.
How the province's overdose crisis may be keeping moms and newborns apart. And
I've learned a lot in the last 4 years.
Why Jody WilsonRaybould isn't running in the next federal election.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. After years of promises, BC and the federal government have reached a deal to create $10 a day childcare. But as Lindsay Duncombe explains, some parents are skeptical and say they've seen this sort of pomp and circumstance before, often as parties gear up for potential elections.
The scenery, the baby, the announcement. With election talk ramping up, the federal Liberals' latest funding announcement looks a lot like a campaign stop.
We're making your life easier and more affordable, and we're making sure kids get the best possible start in life.
By the end of 2022, the goal is to have more than 12,000 $10 a day daycare spots for BC kids under 6, and to bring down the average cost of all spots in the province to $21 a day. It wouldn't fall to $10 a day until the end of 2026.
When you're building a system, like this isn't just a program, it's a whole system across the country, and BC's leading the way. Obviously, it will take time.
Chantal Krish went through several care providers, including expensive nannies, before her 3-year-old got a childcare spot the family is happy with. She says the new plan might not make a difference for her eldest, but her younger son, Tristan, should benefit.
There's enough challenges being a parent with young children. Like, dealing with childcare shouldn't really be one, and if anything, it's the biggest one.
Not only does the plan promise cheaper quality care, it promises more of it. 30,000 new spots in public or not-for-profit centres in the next 5 years. Some providers say they've heard these kinds of promises before.
It is not what's in the best interest of the children in BC. It is only about votes for parents. That is what they want.
Great start. Really important language. I think a real chance to make an historic lifetime difference for both the parents and the kids and for Canada's economic future. But how that gets played out is going to be in the fine print.
The reason why the full agreement hasn't been released yet may be because the federal government is negotiating with other provinces. Or it could be that all the details haven't been hashed out yet, but the timing was right to make an announcement. Potential federal election and all. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
The mother of the toddler killed while walking with her dad earlier this week is speaking out. A car crashed into them at Hornby and Smythe in downtown Vancouver on Tuesday evening. Mira Baines joins us live from the scene now with more. Mira, absolutely tragic. What is the baby's mom saying tonight?
Well, Anita, I'm standing here in front of a growing memorial for the young child that was killed after that 2-car collision on Tuesday night. Now, the 23-month-old child was being carried by her father. The mother of the young girl spoke to CBC News and said, "I miss my daughter." She witnessed what happened that night. According to police, a black Ford Escape crashed into a black McLaren sports car shortly after 6 p.m. here at Smythe and Hornby. One of the vehicles drove onto the sidewalk, hitting the 31-year-old father, whose name is Michael, and his daughter, Ocean Oshie Noel. She died instantly. Her father is in hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Vancouver police had originally said that the child was 11 months old, but corrected themselves. The child's mother, named Star, questions why there are no yellow concrete barriers to prevent such crashes. She had been coming home from work when she saw what happened. Vancouver police say the 29-year-old driver of the Ford Escape was arrested after the crash, but so far no charges are recommended. Vancouver police are still trying to determine the cause of the crash, but they do believe it's not the result of drugs or alcohol. Anita?
Mira Baines live for us tonight. Thank you, Mira. A man has died in Campbell River along with a police service dog after a confrontation with police this morning.
Guns drawn, probably about 45 seconds to a minute of you know, get out of the car, you're under arrest, put your hands up kind of thing. And then all of a sudden 6 or 8 shots rang out.
Around 9 a.m., an RCMP officer tried to stop a vehicle for an outstanding warrant. Police say the driver refused to stop and fled the area. Shortly after, a Mountie accompanied by a service dog cornered the vehicle in a parking lot. The police dog ended up getting stabbed and killed. The suspect was shot and then pronounced dead on scene. The officer was treated for a knife wound. Because this is a police-involved incident, the Independent Investigations Office is now on the case. Well, independent Vancouver MP and former Liberal cabinet minister Jody Wilson-Raybould is not running in the next federal election. She says she is dismayed by the state of Canadian politics, even calling it toxic. And as Joel Ballard reports, some say this points to a bigger issue in Parliament.
Outside of Jody Wilson-Raybould's office, a supporter reflects.
She's one of my heroes. She took the fall for truth and honesty.
Wilson-Raybould has twice won the riding of Vancouver-Granville. First as a star Liberal candidate and then as an independent. But Ottawa, she says, has become too toxic.
Parliament right now, for me, has become an incredibly hyper-partisan environment. And I know it's politics, but I think that substantive issues, the real issues that are facing us, can be addressed in a more pragmatic, more collaborative manner. And for me, that place is not Parliament.
Wilson-Raybould was Canada's first Indigenous Justice Minister, embroiled in the SNC-Lavalin controversy, where she claimed Trudeau and his office attempted to bully her into offering a deferred prosecution agreement to the Quebec engineering firm. She refused and eventually resigned from cabinet before getting booted from the Liberal Party.
It also speaks to her, as she would say, her truth to power, to uphold what is right, uphold what is correct, and really have the integrity to continue to really demonstrate her values as an Indigenous person.
Her work, he says, has inspired Indigenous people across Canada, especially young girls. So far, 14 men and 6 women have announced they won't seek re-election. And while men often cite retirement, for women, Wilson-Raybould's decision is common.
Most of the women who are not running again are actually in the prime of their career, and they're saying that they feel that they can have or they want to have play their role in changing public policy outside of Parliament.
This announcement comes shortly after another Indigenous MP, Mumalakakak of Nunavut, said she too isn't seeking another term, saying Canadian politics is not a welcoming place for Indigenous people. The Native Women's Association of Canada says both announcements point to systemic racism in Parliament.
How are we going to fix this? Because how are we going to ensure that we have our voices heard if every time somebody gets in, an Indigenous woman gets into the Parliament, there's these kinds of issues surfacing?
Changes are needed, she says. Back in Vancouver, Wilson-Raybould is tight-lipped about exactly what the future holds.
I think she'll find an apparatus and a platform to be more effective than the cage, which is our legislative system.
Her fans aren't worried and feel she'll continue to fight for what's right. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
People living in BC's long-term care facilities will soon be allowed visits from friends and family without restrictions. The COVID-19 pandemic has been tough on those residents, many of them isolated for more than a year. The CBC's Tanya Fletcher joins us live with more on this. Tanya, great news for those who have been separated. So what are all the changes?
Well, the care home visitation changes kick in as of July 19th, and here they are. So friends and family will no longer need to book a visit in advance. There will be no more limits on the number of loved ones that can visit a resident at any given time. And visitors, this might be the catch, are expected to have had at least both doses of the vaccine for 2 weeks or more.
So visitors will be asked to provide proof of immunization when they arrive at a facility, and will continue to need to wear a medical mask when they're in common areas. But they'll no longer be required to follow those infection prevention measures when they're in the room with their loved one.
For those not fully immunized, the current COVID protocols will remain in place.
Okay, so looser rules for visitors, but stricter rules for staff, at least when it comes to vaccines.
Yes, a provincial health order is coming that will make a care home employee's immunization status transparent. Up until now, staff didn't have to disclose whether they'd been vaccinated or not. Now the province will keep track of that information through the workers' personal health information.
Workers who are not fully vaccinated will be required to adhere to the ongoing infection prevention and control measures that we have now. And that includes wearing masks. As well, they will be they will be required to be tested for COVID-19 using rapid tests 3 times a week.
All facilities are also required to provide public health with information on the immunization status of all residents and volunteers, as well as the paid workers. Each care home will continue to maintain a sign-in list for contact tracing purposes as well. And adult day programs and larger facility-wide social events or gatherings are safe to resume now as well. Anita?
Okay, Tanya, thank you. Some positive news tonight. A record high 86,000 people received a first or second dose of the COVID vaccine yesterday as the province reports 59 new cases and 1 death. 40% of eligible British Columbians are now fully vaccinated. 74 people are in hospital with 19 in intensive care. Well, newborns may be some of the smallest victims of BC's toxic drug crisis. Mounting evidence shows keeping moms and their babies together during recovery leads to far greater outcomes for both parent and child. But as Isabelle Regam reports, there are limited treatment beds in BC for moms and newborns, and the wait list is growing.
This little piggy ate roast beef, and this little piggy ate none. Mallory Fuster has been on a decade-long turbulent journey to sobriety. Her daughter, Marika, has been a light, and so has her firstborn, Lily.
I was about 17, almost 18 years old.
She had Lily while living in foster care, where she began smoking marijuana. By 18 years old, she turned to prostitution to make ends meet. Soon after, Lily was taken away from her.
That took every belief that I was worth anything. I ended up becoming a survivor of human trafficking.
Now 2.5 years sober, she credits her recovery to a stay at a BC treatment center while pregnant with Marika, where both mom and newborn were cared for, a program she wishes had been available to her during her first pregnancy.
That's what made the difference between me getting sober or staying in that pain.
But she knows not all mothers get the same care.
They're not going to make it to detox because there's not enough beds.
At BC Women's Hospital, the overdose crisis has made it even more difficult to get one of only a dozen beds in its mother-child treatment program.
We have a constant waiting list to access services. We have had increasing severity of illness with substance use disorder.
Dr. Patricelli has spent years researching the positive outcomes of keeping parents and newborn together during treatment. One of the biggest hurdles remains the stigma.
To be able to really treat the substance use as a healthcare issue.
Tamara Strayton, a mother in recovery, knows that stigma firsthand.
I felt like I couldn't be honest if I relapsed because, out of fear that they would take my child away.
5 years sober, she now runs support programs to help other women in recovery.
There isn't a lot of help right now for, mothers and children.
The province says there are upwards of 3,000 publicly funded treatment beds in BC. 56 are available for moms and their babies. The Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction says we know that gaps remain in the system and we're working quickly to improve access.
My biggest dreams in life are just to see Lily and hold Lily and just be reunited with her. Just be a good mom and to both of my girls, not just one.
Fuster hopes other mothers get the help they need sooner rather than later.
You're going to be a good little mama one day.
Isabelle Regam, CBC News, Vancouver.
The beaches around Baines Sound on Vancouver Island are yet another example of how deadly the recent record heat wave has been in BC. Tens of thousands of oysters and other shellfish are now dead or still dying after record temperatures. Extremely low tides at the time, the hottest time of the day, left the shellfish to sizzle. To make matters worse, when the tide came in, even it was too warm to do much good.
It basically cooked the oysters, clams, mussels. Most of the mussels around here now are all gone. Probably about between 30 and 40% of my oysters. And the clams are a little higher. They really didn't like the heat.
This area of the BC coast has been known for its cool, crisp water and ideal oyster growing conditions. But even in the last 10 years, the warming water has increased the risk of bacteria in the oysters. Now, the recent blast of heat could be the final straw for some farmers. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with the mayor of Lytton today to express his support for the community as residents wait for tomorrow's tour of the burned-out town. Meanwhile, some rain in the interior has given wildfire fighters a needed boost. It let firefighters back onto the front lines after hot, dry weather earlier this week forced them to pull back. Still, 2 blazes sprang up overnight that are threatening buildings. The fire east of Houston is forcing an evacuation order, while people near the fire south of Kamloops are asked to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Amy Bell is here now. And Amy, some much needed rain for those wildfires, but is that relief going to continue?
We will see the potential for some rain again tonight with some thunderstorm activity. We can even see it's marginal, but we actually have seen the fire danger rating improve since yesterday. So not seeing quite as much area in the red or the orange, especially in the southeast corners of the province where we've had so much fire activity. We still are not out of the woods by any stretch, with a lot of hot weather still on the way, but definitely looking a little bit better after some precipitation over the last 24 hours. We do still have the severe thunderstorm warnings up for a few areas, though, such as the North and South Thompson regions, Okanagan Valley, and that includes Kelowna, Nicola, the Fraser Canyon North and boundary areas. So Kamloops, Ashcroft, all those areas still dealing with a lot of thunder and lightning. We saw quite a few lightning strikes today with some rain and some hail. Tomorrow will be a much more settled day across most of the province. And for us, for the weekend, we're setting up for great shape. Had this cloud cover today, but we get right back into the sunshine tomorrow. And these 24s, these are all at the beach. It'll be slightly warmer inland right through until early next week.
All right. Thanks very much, Amy.
You're welcome.
Over the past few weeks, we've been sharing some of the Indigenous languages spoken across Vancouver Island and the people working hard to revitalize them. Now we're going to be showing you some of the languages spoken on the mainland. A Metro Vancouver-based Cree teacher is sharing a phrase she thinks we should know. Have a listen.
My name is Dorothy Visser. I am originally from the Salt Lake Cree Nation of Alberta, from the Treaty 6 territory. I would like you to learn this word, Nehiawewin. Nehiawewin. It is Cree language, Nehiawewin, and it means retaining our heritage, and it's important because we lost so much of our language when the children were taken away from families to residential schools and foster care. And it's important to teach our children now, and those of whom want to learn the language, the Nehiawewin, because children especially learn so quickly at an early age, and it's important to teach them now because they will never forget if they are taught at an early age. So I thank you for listening. All my relations.
And if you're not already doing so, we want to let you know that you can watch us live on CBC Gem. That's our free app. Lots of CBC programs on Gem. Our show, though, is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. The Assembly of First Nations has elected a new chief. Why Roseanne Archibald is making history. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, it started with a cat scratch, a viral video, then a light bulb moment. Here's how one young Nova Scotia woman came to run an organization that helps seniors or those with a terminal illness find a second forever home for their beloved cat or dog.
My grandmother passed away in September of 2019, and Mackenzie was her cat, and she very quickly took to my grandfather. And my grandfather, that was my grandmother's legacy, was Mackenzie at the time. And when he ended up going into a hospital, and he knew he was end of life, he was looking for someone to take Mackenzie. And because of her grumpy, growly nature, look how beautiful you are, we knew would spend the rest of her life in a shelter. So I adopted her. And it was the best decision I've ever made.
What do you think about when we come to the beach?
Say cheese. It was the pandemic. We went into lockdown again. I was bored and I had all these videos. And there was one where on Christmas morning, Mackenzie growled and scratched my face.
Can you say Merry Christmas?
My older cousins joked this should go viral, and I was like, you know, I could post this on TikTok. The more I posted, the more people picked it up, and more we started getting followers, and Mackenzie developed a fan base, and people loved it, and they started sharing their own stories about how they couldn't adopt their grandparents' cats. And that's what my grandfather's cat does. We arrange the home, and the animal stays with the person right up until either they move into a nursing home or, heaven forbid, pass away, and then the animal goes with their second forever family.
Everything bagel toasted with extra plain cream cheese. And a side order of bacon.
I love the work the SPCA does. I love the work shelters do. But my grandfather's cat works to arrange the homes rather than rehome. I actually worried that there weren't a lot of people out there that would want to adopt. I really thought that would be our biggest hurdle, but it has been the opposite. We have hundreds of people on our email list, hundreds of people waiting. If we could help one person, that was it. That was my goal. And we succeeded 7 times over at this point in just 6 weeks. So, like, at the end of the day, this is just about kindness and compassion. The next time you have an opportunity to do the right... There's Mackenzie. The next time you have an opportunity to do the right thing or make a difference, no matter how small it is, you never know how it's going to grow. And I think it's really important that we all remember that. We always take kindness and compassion first.
I understand. I understand.
Little cuties. All right, we have national news coming up in just a few moments, so don't go anywhere. Roseanne Archibald of Ontario will be the first female national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. After a close race, second-place candidate Reginald Belrose of Saskatchewan conceded this afternoon after 5 ballots. Olivia Stefanovich has more on the historic vote.
I, Roseanne Archibald.
A historic moment for a trailblazing leader.
And you can tell all the women in your life that the glass ceiling has been broken.
Roseanne Archibald was the first woman to lead the Assembly of First Nations in Ontario. Now, she becomes the first female to take the helm of the entire national advocacy organization, after her main opponent, Reginald Belrose, conceded.
It's time for change on so many levels. And with the recent discovery and recovery of our little ones across this country, we are all awake.
A major priority, implementing all 94 recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
That's impactful for certainly, non-Indigenous people who are now really tuning into this, but certainly even more so for our communities.
This Anishinaabe researcher says grassroots members want Archibald to usher in a new era, with more accountability and transparency.
The AFN needs an overhaul. I think Roseanne Archibald, from what I know of her and her work with the AFN, is willing to do that.
Archibald's history with the AFN is complicated. She scrutinized the organization's financial management. The Assembly also launched an investigation into bullying and harassment allegations against her.
When you try to do the right thing for the right reasons, Indigenous people and Indigenous women are usually punished.
Still, he says the path she's paving can make a difference.
She can definitely maybe set an example for other female leaders out there who maybe are on the fence about running into politics.
Archibald is known for not shying away from criticizing government, changing dynamics ahead of a possible upcoming snap federal election. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
2 federal NDP MPs are calling for a special prosecutor for crimes committed at former residential schools. They're accusing the federal government of colluding with major churches and covering up evidence of abuse and deaths.
The map of Canada is covered with crime scenes. The unmarked graves that have shocked Canadians are just the tip of the iceberg. We have been saying this for generations, and it's time for Canada to face the truth. Together with Charlie Angus, I am calling on Attorney General David Lametti to appoint an independent special prosecutor immediately that has the power and resources to conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation into residential schools, day schools, sanatoriums, and everywhere Indigenous children and peoples have faced decades of violence and abuse at the hands of the genocidal partnership between the federal institution and the churches.
The 2 MPs identified 2 priests who they say committed sexual and other crimes against Indigenous children. They accuse the federal government of sitting on a trove of documents that identify perpetrators, documents they want to see made public. An Indigenous business owner in Member 2, Nova Scotia, is refusing to take banknotes featuring John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister who played an instrumental role in creating residential schools. Erin Potty shows us how a Mi'kmaq-owned pizza shop is staging its own protest, one $10 bill at a time.
You better check your wallet before heading into Paul McDonald's pizza joint in Member 2. He is no longer accepting bills featuring Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, who is considered an architect of Canada's residential school system. The owner's decision comes following multiple discoveries of unmarked graves at former residential schools across Canada.
Ripping children away from their families, trying to take the nativeness out of them, keeping them away from their parents, and it's just wrong in my opinion.
It's a matter that hits close to home. His mother was a residential school survivor who talked only briefly about the abuse she witnessed. He says this protest was inspired by other acts of defiance in his community, such as flying the Canada flag upside down.
Again, like going back to all the stuff that's being removed, we changed the street, Cornwallis. I mean, that's a street name. Why can't we do the same with money?
The Bank of Canada says there's no law that forces businesses to take certain banknotes or other forms of payment. A retired Halifax law professor agrees, saying it is a private agreement between buyer and seller.
One example of that, all for very different reasons, is the position by many people during the COVID pandemic that they would not accept cash, but that you had to pay by debit or charge, even though people were offering cash as legal tender.
McDonald says staff can choose to enforce the store's new rule, but as long as he's working the cash, those $10 bills will not be accepted.
Like Terry Fox, why isn't he on a bill? You know, that man, he started all the fundraising with the run across Canada and stuff, right? Those are the kind of people we need to put on the bill. Positive.
The Bank of Canada hasn't featured McDonald on a bill since 2017 and says the old bills will remain in circulation until they are worn out. McDonald has been replaced on the bill by Nova Scotia civil rights icon Viola Desmond. Erin Potty, CBC News, Member 2.
U.S. President Joe Biden has moved up the end date of America's military mission in Afghanistan to August 31st. As Katie Simpson shows us, Afghan troops will be on their own to battle a resurgent Taliban.
Taliban fighters loaded explosives into an empty building. This once was a government checkpoint, now dust in the wake of the Taliban's continued territorial gains. Violence has spiked across much of the country as the U.S. accelerated its troop withdrawal, a process that will be completed by the end of August.
I will not send another generation of Americans to war in Afghanistan.
While there's no mission accomplished moment, the president says the U.S. achieved its goals of killing Osama bin Laden and eliminating al-Qaeda as a national security threat. Biden downplayed the Taliban's advances despite the brutal surge in fighting.
Mr. President, will the United States be responsible for the loss of Afghan civilian lives that could happen after the military exit?
No, no, no. It's up to the people of Afghanistan to decide on what government they want, not us to impose the government on them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
UK forces are going home too, even though the Prime Minister sees a far more bleak future for Afghanistan.
We are not about to turn away, nor are we under any illusions about the perils of today's situation and what may lie ahead.
There is deep worry the volatility will only increase.
The larger picture of the whole thing is that unfortunately Taliban have been emboldened by our decision to withdraw.
And while Afghanistan may no longer be a place where attacks against the U.S. are plotted, there are predictions that could change.
Unfortunately, if there isn't some semblance of stability in Afghanistan, it is going to become a playground for transnational terrorist groups.
President Biden is firmly standing by his decision. While he wouldn't directly answer the question whether 20 years of conflict was worth it, he made the argument that the cost of staying longer, the human cost, was simply too high. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Quebec is sending a message: get vaccinated or be prepared to miss out. How vaccine passports will work next.
And now for our Saturday special report. Electric cars used to be considered an idea for the future. But there's a man in British Columbia who believes the future has arrived. He's developed an electric car that he says can be easily mass-produced. And he's already lined up a few potential buyers. But as Ian Haddo-Manzing reports, not everyone's convinced.
On looks alone, the XR1 is certainly eye-catching. And the man who developed it says it's much more than just a pretty car.
I'm not a braggadocious person, but I'm here to tell you that it is the only real electric automobile in the entire world, bar none. That statement cannot be refuted. It cannot be challenged.
Ramirez says the XR1 is revolutionary. A top speed of over 100 kilometers an hour, 0 to 90 in about 12 seconds. A range between charges of up to 160 kilometers. And batteries that can be recharged overnight by plugging it into a wall socket. All of this can be mass-produced, he says, for $15,000 to $18,000 each. Last month, Ramirez and some local promoters told the people of Campbell River that their town would be the site of the first XR plant. With the promise of 500 jobs and even more spin-off business, the mayor says everyone's excited.
The reaction is very, very positive. We are a very progressive community, and we've got a lot of things going for us, but we can always use another good operation like this.
The car's promoters say the mayor is not the only one who's embraced the XR1. They say hundreds of people have already made deposits. David Kuntz has put down $1,000.
Putting my money down now has ensured me to get one of these special edition vehicles right now. So within a year, I'll have my car, I hope.
But not everyone is as excited about the XR1. All of the engineers we contacted said they doubted an electric car could be mass-produced for the price and with the specifications Ramirez is promised.
But you can't put them all together.
An engineer familiar with electric cars read through the XR's business plan, and he says he doesn't think the vehicle can live up to its billing.
With present-day batteries, that can't be done. That's fairly clear, because he just doesn't have enough batteries in the vehicle to get the range that he says.
Peabody and the other engineers say there are two fundamental problems with the XR project. First, there is no evidence that the car has been independently tested to see if it goes as far and as fast as Ramirez promises. Second, there is no true prototype of the car. This version is much different than what is supposed to be mass-produced.
What he's got is like an experimental prototype that he's been working on. But what he needs to show people is the vehicle he's going to sell them.
If we put a sunroof...
Even without the prototype, Ramirez has been able to persuade people the car is for real. But his credibility has been in question before. He faces a civil fraud trial in Texas. The state alleges he and a partner received money for computers and never delivered them. And 25 years ago, Ramirez served 4 years in prison for bank robbery. He says he's been pardoned for the bank robbery and that the fraud allegations are groundless.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. People living in BC's long-term care facilities will soon be allowed visits from family and friends without restrictions. The COVID-19 pandemic has been tough on those residents, many of them isolated for more than a year. Visitors have to be fully vaccinated.
These things just keep getting announced. Nobody knows how it's going to roll out.
A deal has been reached with the feds with BC to offer childcare at an average of $10 a day. The deal also aims to create 30,000 new spaces here in the next 5 years. But critics say the lack of early childhood educators means it doesn't matter if the spaces are there because there is a staffing issue. And independent Vancouver MP and former Liberal cabinet minister Jody Wilson-Raybould says she is not running in the next federal election. She says she is dismayed by the state of Canadian politics and that Parliament is focused on partisanship over achieving positive change for Canadians. She calls it toxic and ineffective. Quebec's message to residents: get vaccinated or be prepared to miss out. Starting in the fall, the province will start using a vaccination passport. Now, if you don't have a QR code, you could find access to some services restricted. Chloe Rinaldi breaks down the rules.
If Quebec is hit by another wave of COVID-19 in the fall, the health minister says shutting down entire sectors again isn't an option. Instead, Christian Dubé says those not fully vaccinated could be turned away from services like restaurants, gyms, and cultural events.
The vaccination passport will be used if and only if the transmission or outbreaks justify it in a sector or in a territory.
The vaccine passport will be implemented in September, once everyone has had the chance to get their 2 doses. Dubé says 95% of recent cases are among those who still haven't been vaccinated.
A special call to young adults between 18 and 30. I'll tell you that this is starting to be urgent to give you a first dose in July, if you want to be adequately vaccinated by September 1st.
Je pense que c'est une bonne chose pour se protéger, pour pas recommencer à l'automne un confinement.
And that's okay for me. Personally, I agree with that. I know that some people are skeptical of being vaccinated.
A recent survey by the Quebec National Institute of Public Health shows that 73% of people agree with giving privileges to people who are vaccinated, and 22% disagreed. These two were on their way to get their second vaccine, but had some doubts over the passport.
I think it's a good idea as long as it's, everyone actually has access to a vaccine and is able to get a jab and take time off work.
This professor of bioethics believes this will help encourage people to get vaccinated.
We have seen in other countries vaccine passports implemented not by the government, but rather by the private sector. That leads to much more discrimination than what we're seeing in Quebec, which is a government decision, a policy that is well thought out, that minimizes discrimination as much as possible.
Dubé says the measure won't apply to kids under 12, and the government is looking at solutions for those unable to be vaccinated for health reasons. Chloe Rinaldi, CBC News, Montreal.
A new COVID variant of concern is emerging. It's called Lambda, and 11 cases have been confirmed so far in Canada. But as Vicadopia explains, the variant is straining healthcare in the country where it was first identified.
COVID-19 has swamped South America, which has suffered a quarter of the world's deaths, even though it's less than 10% of the planet's population. Most Peruvians are unvaccinated, allowing the Lambda variant to spread and take over as the dominant strain in just a few months.
That is a early but strong suggestion that this is a more transmissible variant. Otherwise, there is no real way to explain it. And not just because I'm saying this, but because we've seen this pattern before.
We've seen it in the Delta variant, which is expected to become dominant in Canada. So far, Lambda's case count here isn't quite known.
We know of 11, but there could be further ones in the provinces that are just being gathered at this moment. And we don't know the full impact.
Scientists do know mutations to the spike protein give variants like Lambda a tactical advantage in attacking our immune systems. But variants also compete with each other for dominance.
So that's why we have this period of uncertainty when we start picking up new variants. Ultimately, it depends on what happens in the population. So it's really difficult to predict.
Just how much more transmissible Lambda is, and if that translates into more severe illness, is still part of the mystery.
I think we've all learned the hard way not to underestimate this virus. I think a lot of people are keeping an eye out for it.
Early lab tests suggest the mRNA vaccines offer strong protection against Lambda, though researchers noticed the variant did put up more of a fight than the original virus, and they warn it's only a matter of time before more resistant variants emerge. Vic Adopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Record heat, lack of rain. Manitoba faces a historic drought. Why it's pushing farmers to the brink. Next. And at 6:40, you're looking at a live shot of Science World and Falls Creek. After the break, Amy will be here with a look at what you can expect over the next week. Will we get some rain and some relief for firefighters, or will this heat and hot weather continue?
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Vancouver Queer Film Festival is back. Enjoy the best in independent queer cinema along with workshops, artist panels, Q&As, and more. Learn more at queerfilmfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
Extreme heat in Western Canada is only adding problems for farmers in the region. Vast swaths of the prairies are also suffering through a lack of water and feed. As Riley Lachuk reports, cattle producers are grappling with the possibilities of selling or culling their herds.
On his farm near Oak Point, Manitoba, this is how Tom Johnson is watering his cattle.
Probably just drank this dry this morning.
Twice a day, morning and night, he hauls water to these makeshift troughs. His dugout, where his herd usually gets water, is nearly empty. On his hay fields, there is nothing to bale for winter. Grass and hay didn't grow this year. He says his neighbors here in the Interlake are in the same boat.
The dugouts have always lasted till, late October. They'd freeze in November, we'd get snow, fill them back up, everything. But end of June, beginning of July, and our dugouts are dry. Never, ever seen that before.
In the rural municipality of St. Laurent, an agricultural state of disaster has been declared. The RM is asking for provincial and federal help. Otherwise, they say some farmers may need to sell or cull their herds. It's a similar story across Manitoba. Many areas have received less than half the normal amount of rainfall. Last week's extreme heat further stunting crop growth and putting a further strain on water supplies.
To say we've never seen this before, I don't think would be right. But we're in some challenging times.
Bill Campbell is president of Keystone Agricultural Producers. His farm in western Manitoba is also dry. Livestock producers, he says, need the most help.
Probably the most important thing at this point in time is access to good, clean drinking water for livestock.
Premier Brian Pallister says he has toured parts of the Interlake and discussions about what financial aid the province can offer will happen soon.
We're all hoping for rain because there was some timely rains a number of days ago, but we need more rain. The drought conditions are real.
Back on Tom Johnson's farm, he will hold out as long as he can, but hasn't ruled out the thought of selling his herd too.
We're going to see how far we can go and then make those tough decisions this fall.
Now, Campbell says it's too early to attach a monetary value, how much money the dry weather this summer will cost Manitoba farmers. He says that figure won't be known till crops like these are pulled off the fields later this summer. What is certain, though, he says, is that Manitoba needs rain, and soon. Riley Lachuk, CBC News, near Minto, Manitoba.
Just devastating for the farmers there, and like you said, they need rain. Is that going to happen anytime soon?
Not really. We have a few areas that'll see some showers midweek next week, but really nothing significant in the next coming week. So certainly not great news there. We did have some better news though for our dry conditions in the interior. We're seeing a lot of shower activity and overnight and in through this morning, and then today, as you can see on the radar, when it starts to just explode in that southeast corner there, that is all the thunder and lightning. We did have some extreme thunderstorms earlier today, but things do seem to be settling down, though there is still a chance in some areas of the Kootenays and the Okanagan and just generally in the interior. Once you get up north, things are much calmer today, and things will calm down across the province for tomorrow, but certainly still seeing some active weather, and of course that risk of lightning still remains, but it has brought that fire danger warning down minimally in those extreme conditions. They're now a little bit more manageable. Taking a look at the next few days, though, you can see things do start to clear up for tomorrow, and we get quite a good stretch before we start to see a few more cells re-emerging, and then we'll see that pattern sort of shifting northward and leaving the south of the province a little bit clearer for the next several days, which will be a nice bit of relief. Taking across the province, for us locally, you are still dealing with some showers in Tofino tomorrow, unfortunately, but for most areas of Vancouver Island, looking at a nice mix of sun and cloud, and those temperatures in the mid-20s, so a little bit warmer than we saw today. Whistler, a high of 25 with a mix of sun and cloud. We see more sunshine for the Fraser Valley tomorrow. And most areas along the south coast will see a bit of cloud to start tomorrow, but nothing like today. We'll see it dissipating quite quickly, and then we'll head into sunshine and much warmer temperatures by the afternoon. Taking a look up at Dease Lake, you will see some morning showers with a high of 21. Prince Rupert, you'll see some showers as well. Moving inland for the central coast, still very warm for areas such as Terrace and Smithers. Prince George at 30 with some showers. Still unsettled around Williams Lake, especially tomorrow morning. You do still have that risk of thunderstorms. Kelowna, high of 33. Cranbrook at 30. So actually a little bit cooler than we've seen in the last couple of days. But still, next week, looking forward, it's just a few areas that'll be dealing with some shower activity. For the most part, seeing this warm and dry weather persisting over much of the province. For our 5-day forecast tomorrow, 24 at the water, 27 inland. A little bit warmer for Saturday and Sunday. And we're up near 30 degrees for Monday and Tuesday. So get that sunscreen out. You're going to need it.
No kidding. And all those hats, too.
Yes.
Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
This year's Olympic Games in Tokyo were never going to be normal, but just 2 weeks before the Games begin, athletes and their supporters have been dealt another blow. All fans are now being told to stay away. Chris Rees explains why.
Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has declared another state of emergency for Tokyo and surrounding areas. This one lasts until August 22nd, well past the Olympic Games and just before the Paralympic Games. It's another blow to an already embattled event. This latest order means no spectators in arenas and stadiums, no fans in bars or restaurants. No atmosphere like this. Retired Canadian rugby star Jen Kish still cherishes the moment her team won bronze in Rio in 2016 in front of a cheering crowd.
What's sad about it is that, once you win or if you lose, that's when you're going to get the reaction from fans. And those are moments that you want to be able to share with fans.
Japan has been struggling with rising COVID cases because of the fast-spreading Delta variant. Add to that, only about 15% of the country's population is fully vaccinated. It's one of the reasons many locals are upset that the Games haven't been canceled. Dozens of demonstrators protested as IOC President Thomas Bach landed in Tokyo early Thursday. This protester said infections will definitely spread if the Olympics are held and overseas visitors will bring the virus back to their home country. It will be a disaster. My poster says, Bach, go home. Japan has already spent more than $15 billion on the Olympics so far, and organizers have already lost millions in tourist revenue and now ticket sales. Kish has a message for her fellow athletes. Find a way to make the Games count, even without the fans.
At the end of the day, there's still an Olympic medal on the line. Very few athletes in the world have those.
Team Canada said their friends and family will be cheering hard from home. And right now, that's the best that athletes can hope for, when most in Japan would rather not see the Games go on. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Well, it was quite the run for the Montreal Canadiens, but in the end, the Habs ran out of steam and out of luck. Nevertheless, fans are still relishing in a year that wasn't meant to be. CBC Montreal's Douglas Gellivan looks back at the playoff run.
Amid the heartbreak of losing the Stanley Cup final, and it is genuine heartbreak, there's also a sense of gratefulness for the incredible run the Montreal Canadiens went on this spring and summer. The Habs weren't expected to make it out of the first round, but down 3-1 to the Toronto Maple Leafs, something happened.
Chance Kotkaniemi scores!
A switch flipped, and fans watched the most inspiring hockey they'd seen from the Habs in more than 2 decades. Now, the fairy tale didn't have its perfect happily ever after ending.
Lightning has struck twice!
Tampa was just too strong. A budding dynasty, really. There's no shame in losing to a team of that quality, even if one of their star players, Nikita Kucherov, was, let's say, less than a gracious winner.
The fans in Montreal, come on. They acted like they won the Stanley Cup last game. You kidding me?
For an entire generation of Habs fans, no, it wasn't a joke. They never experienced winning a game in the final before, or an overtime goal to send the Habs to the finals, on Quebec's Fête Nationale, no less. Fans who remember the glory days of back-to-back-to-back-to-back cups in the 70s may lament the fact younger fans are celebrating a team that fell short. But those fans can take solace in the fact that for a franchise that let its standard of excellence slip, this team and its young, talented core has brought it back to expecting more.
Okay, what would you do with a cool $35 million? A Kamloops man has some ideas after winning the lottery. He's doing the happy dance. That's next.
Hello, Tishtile. My name is Bama Mente.
Tishtile, my name is Tenzin Chuki.
Hi, my name is Tashi Nangsitsang.
Tishtile, nghe mình là ý sĩ tế dân sự yếu.
Tishtile, nghe mình diki chodun jamyaling re.
Tishtile, I'm Chimilamo.
Tishtile, nghe mình là Tenzin Omuyi.
Tishtile, my name is Hamato.
Tishtile, my name is Organ Badisang.
Nga, gishilaramba gundutundoyi.
First thing that comes to my mind is that we've visited Tibet. Oftentimes people are like, what does Tibet look like? I've heard it's beautiful. It's the rooftop of the world, the third pole. And oftentimes someone like me doesn't have an answer.
That we're super spiritual or super peaceful. All we want to do is, express our compassion.
Everybody in Tibet is either a monk or a nun, and everybody in Tibet is a vegetarian. Tibetans love their meat.
How's the Dalai Lama? I don't know. I mean, I check the news just like everyone else. So if you found out about him, I'm probably the same. I don't call him on every Tuesday.
Oh, people ask first, how do you pronounce Tibet? Because I'll say I'm from Tibet, and they'll say, are you from Quebec?
We try to avoid killing insects. So sometimes people will be like, oh, why don't you just step on it? But it's actually a really big deal to us because we really treasure any life, no matter big or small.
Whether or not our monks can levitate and do Shaolin, which is exactly the question that my Uber driver asked me today.
My favorite Tibetan food is something called tentuk. It's a hot noodle dish with hand-pulled noodles. And I think I'm a true Tibetan Himalayan girl that just likes a hearty, hot soup.
My favorite Tibetan food is tsamba, which is milled Tibetan barley. And I eat it for breakfast, but you can have it for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, so that's why I like it.
The classic Tibetan momos. Momos.
Momos. Momos. Momos is a staple food of Tibet. I love the variety of it. You can put anything you can put inside as a fillings.
Different homes have different tastes and textures.
The amount of work you put behind eating momos, with the family, it's very social, it's delicious.
Tibetans by nature, I find, are very hospitable and very kind and compassionate. I think that has a lot to do with our religion and our upbringing and our culture.
There's a lot of inclusive nationalities, but Tibetans would be marked as one that's especially warm and inviting to strangers.
A retired truck driver from Kamloops is $35 million richer after winning part of the Lotto Max jackpot. That's Gary Hill doing his happy dance here. Matched all the 7 numbers on his ticket in the June 2020 lucky draw, June 22nd rather. Hill bought the ticket at a tobacco shop in Kamloops' North Shore. He says his head is still in the clouds over the news.
And I had to read it again, and then my legs went like spaghetti, and I grabbed the wall, and I went, I have to look at the ticket. But I knew they were my numbers because I memorized them. And I looked at the ticket and looked at the numbers, and I fell on the bed and actually cried for 15 minutes.
Hill wants to use the money to travel to Denmark after all travel restrictions have ended, and he also wants to buy a house. Congratulations. I'm pretty sure that everyone's legs would turn to spaghetti if they won that much money. All the best. And you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news is with Tanya Fletcher after the National. Good night.